one of the biggest learnings since I've joined Stick and Twist. It's share early and share raw thinking. Great strategy is ultimately the choices that you're making of what you're not doing as much as what you are doing. So you have to kind of really distill and edit and not try and kind of open your full suitcase of everything you've looked at because, they don't have time, they're not interested.
Hi friends, welcome to the next episode of Between Me and You. Today I'm joined by Anna Laird. She's a strategy partner and the people and culture lead at Stick and Twist. They're a consultancy that's doing things differently in the world of marketing and strategy, and that's some of the key things that we'll be digging into today. In particular, we're going to focus on why the traditional big agency model may be broken and how Stick and Twist's unique people-centred approach is delivering award-winning work and real growth for their clients. And those clients include those in the for good sector. I hope Anna will share her insights on fostering a culture where strategists can thrive and how that translates into greater impact for all businesses and organisations. As always, I invite you to join the conversation, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's get started. So Anna, welcome. It's great to have you here, have a good chat today. To begin with, could you share a little bit about your journey? So in the marketing industry, and in particular, what led you to join Stick and Twist?
I'd love to.
Thank you.
So I've got over 20 years experience in the marketing industry. And most of that was spent in data-driven creative agencies. I've worked in really small independents and really big network agencies. And I actually started out in account handling. So I was always really interested in strategy, but started definitely in client service and then was able to transfer into a strategist role in my late 20s. Absolutely loved it, kind of built my craft doing that, kind of progressed up the ladder to a fairly seniorish role in an agency, and then I would say hit a massive roadblock, both personally and professionally. So just to dig into that a little bit, I'd come back fresh from my second mat leave, kind of late 2019, and was working on one of the flagship accounts in the agency. So it's a really big retailer in the UK, kind of 7-figure revenue annually a year in the agency. And I was really excited, so like super hyped for the opportunity, felt like a really big stretch opportunity. And then a few months in, my best friend became sick. So she got diagnosed with cancer. And then within a very short period of time, she had passed away. So it was obviously really devastating. And the agency gave a bit of lip service to, obviously have some time off for the funeral. And if you need anything, let us know. But it was big account, I was managing a big team, it was going into annual planning period, so it's kind of business as usual. And then a few months later, COVID hit. So with everyone else, went into survival mode, pivot to remote working, kind of just buried everything that was going on in my personal life and really kind of threw myself into work. But I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. I was kind of looking after them during the day and then working in the evening. And there was definitely this sense from the leadership team, because the whole agency model is sold on head hours, right? So the more head hours that you can sell, the more money the agency is going to make. So when everyone flipped to remote working, there's this sense of, we've got to make sure that people's productivity doesn't fall off a cliff, and we're managing that properly. Working crazy hours, and it kind of went on for the whole year. And towards the end of the year, I was just done. Very broken, and I thought I was going to leave the industry. I loved my craft, but I was like, this isn't conducive to a healthy work-life balance, and it wasn't something that I wanted to continue. I was ready to leave the industry, and my old boss, who was head of strategy at a couple of agencies I worked at, got in touch, and he's the founder of Stick and Twist, Nick Baker, and he talked to me about his vision and what he wanted to achieve. So the consultancy is designed to deliver strategy with impact. So we only focus on a strategic offering. And the idea is building a new standard of consultancy, one that's built from the ground up in a way that delivers more impactful work, but also builds a culture where strategists feel safe, motivated, rewarded and valued, and it liberates them to do their best work.
I think when we first spoke, that's what I was really interested in, because it connects with what we're focused on at me&you as well. We are not a big creative agency. We're focused on a couple of key services, and then we have great connections with others like yourselves, knowing that actually that's the right people to use rather than the traditional model of the bigger agency. And I think when preparations for this video, we had a bit of a conversation, and you sort of highlighted the idea that the traditional model is broken, and that Stick and Twist and others are set up to sort of do it in a different way. Could you explain a bit more of why that sort of conventional approach often falls short? I mean, you've hinted a little bit at a few bits, but why is the traditional model broken?
Yeah, and from a strategy perspective, because that's my experience. Yeah, definitely. I think it's helpful to start with what is strategy, and in my world, it's problem solving in the simplest sense. So that could be a really specific marketing, a specific business problem that you solve through marketing, or it could be a much broader marketing plan or framework that you are helping to deliver against the short and the long-term business objectives. I think strategy within a traditional model typically would focus on a specific component of that broader plan. And that may translate to being creative strategy or media strategy, and that's inherently tied to how they generate revenue. So the more creative that they're selling, or the more media that they're buying, the more revenue that they're generating. And creative agencies do that brilliantly. But thinking about CMOs, particularly in the current climate where there's big economic challenges, there's huge pressures that they're facing, their role has broadened. So they're not just CMOs, they've got people responsibilities, they're often in charge of tech and the data, and that's increasing as AI is developing at such a fast pace. And I think when you think about the challenges that they're facing, do they go to their traditional agency to answer that question when actually there's a slight bias there? There's a creative output or a media output that it's within their benefit to sell. And then I think the other kind of frustration that they might have, so kind of missing that strategic sounding board per se and getting that unbiased view. The other challenge in traditional models is it's typically a pyramid structure. So you've got lots of kind of junior strategists or midweight strategists delivering the day-to-day support on the account. And actually it's the more senior experienced strategists who get maybe helicoptered in, kind of big problems or annual planning or a face-to-face meeting, but they're not kind of hands-on the account. And it's that experience that CMOs want, the support that they need, not the kind of more junior day-to-day support. So we've flipped that model. We've kind of also built from the ground up a different operating model. So we're driven by value and impact as opposed to head hours.
Absolutely. And as you highlight, there's a natural bias. This is the core things that we offer. So if we're putting together an overall strategy, we're very likely to focus on the things that we offer and the things that we charge for. Whereas it sounds like with your approach, you can be completely unbiased.
Yes, yeah, that's the intention. That's one of the kind of founding principles. And the other one is to create actionable strategy. So your strategy is useless if no one puts it into practice. So you've got to think about the teams who are going to activate that strategy and what their capability and skill set are. What's their growth mindset? Do they have a growth mindset? Are they able to pivot, to do things in a new way, to drive transformation and, accelerate the growth of the business that they work in? Is the org design set up in a way that creates agile ways of working so you can have experimental and optimal ways of working? So yeah, we look at the big picture, and I think that's happened organically over time. I don't think when Nick founded the business, he was like, this is the perfect setup. He had a vision and a very strong set of values of what he wanted the business to be and the culture that he wanted to create. But actually, through the work that we've done, we've realized what are the key building blocks for great strategy. And I think, and that's informed our operating model, but one of them is intelligence that feeds your strategy. So the market of effectiveness evaluation, the market forecasting, market mapping. You've then got the business and marketing strategy elements. You've then also got organisational readiness. So how you activate those strategies, how you grow the impact of those strategies through the additional support and coaching you provide clients.
So I just want to talk a little bit more about how Stick and Twist does things differently, and in particular about sort of the people and culture piece. Can you give examples of how your approach helps to actually empower clients?
So anyone that joins a consultancy gets one-to-one exec coaching. They get put on a program with Andrew Waddell from Mind and Matters, who's our retained coach. So yeah, we do Facet 5 profiling. We look at that against the team Facet 5 profile. We look at what difference that's adding to the team to then feed into our monthly team coaching. So we have a whole process that we go through where we set our legacy statement for the year, our annual goals. We go into a room each month after kind of scoring ourselves, and we surface all the things that aren't working, the things that are working. And we're very honest. It's very like feelings based, not just systemic. So we make sure that people are kind of properly inducted into that. Alongside that, we have very high autonomy in our roles, a very flat structure. We don't have lots of hierarchy. There's not lots of junior people underneath us. We very much lead our own clients, do everything from proposal through to delivery of the projects and the retrospectives. But we work in a very collaborative way. So strategists, I think, typically have always worked kind of in silo. You do work as part of a bigger team, but you're kind of the one main strategist on the account, or you might have some junior strategists, but it's kind of your point of view, your perspective. And we believe the power of all of us together is far greater than any individual. We also spend a huge amount on training. So I mentioned that £3,000 budget a year for 30 people. Yeah. So like for H2 this year, we've just set the training budget, and that is coming in at over 5k per head. On top of that, we have all the coaching. So if you think about the comparison, it's just miles apart. One came up with the idea of, wouldn't it be great if we could teach clients to do what we do, like not put it in a black box and put a big price tag on it, but democratise it and teach clients how to do great strategy. And that in itself will then free up our time to work more upstream on bigger, more complex problems. There'll always be more problems to solve. We don't have to get defensive about owning everything. So yeah, I think that cultural aspect has led to entrepreneurial initiatives. We've also got something called Life Polls, which is a very agile, AI-supported research methodology that we use. Because we felt traditional research methods were very cumbersome, very weighty, took quite a long time to deliver, and then you've got to distill it all and turn it into insights for strategy. So yeah, we've got lots of different products and services that have been born out of our culture.
You mentioned it just then. I'd like to know a little bit more about the Stick and Twist Academy.
Yeah, so we piloted it with one of our main clients, Lloyds Banking Group. And as I mentioned, it was born out of this desire to just democratise strategy and kind of lift the hood a little bit, because even working agency side in a strategy department for many, many years, no one trains you how to be a strategist. You might go on the odd training course if you're lucky, but actually most of it's self-learning, reading great books like you've got here, attending webinars. And there's all these things you just pick up on the job. And we thought, why don't we create this opportunity to translate those learnings to clients to empower them so that they feel that they can do their own strategy. And like I mentioned, it's then creating more space to tackle the bigger, more complex problems, which we would then hope to help them with. So the idea is that we don't just teach the skills and the capability, but we harness all those kind of tips and tricks that we've picked up and frameworks over the years, and we couple that with coaching. So it's like a confidence and a capability offering. And we have two routes in. One is shortcuts. So it's a series of modules or building blocks that we think underpin great strategy and great strategic thinking. And the other one is called Supercharger. And that's where we more sit alongside the client on a live project, and they hold the pen. So they want to learn how to, develop the brand strategy or the audience growth strategy, but don't quite have the confidence or haven't done that before. So we would step them through it.
I know that your agency has experience and works with some for good sector, some charities you've supported as well. So I know that many of our listeners are from that sector, so it'd be good to understand, I think if we start talking about the sort of the practical takeaways, what things can people action, and even, we'll always add links if there's particular resources that you're thinking of creating.
Yeah. Sure. So I think 2 great shortcuts that we run really kind of are the most practical and most useful and easiest to apply and without actually going through the training. So the first one is really around the good foundations of strategy, which is insight. So your strategy is only as good as the insights that they're built on. And the idea is really to explain what an insight is and what it isn't. It's not a data point, it's not an observation, it's a truth that tells you why a consumer is thinking in a certain way, acting in a certain way, feeling a certain something, which then influences how they're interacting with your brand or your organisation. We then tell people how to kind of source and find the right insights. So we've got a framework, 2 frameworks. The first is called the sieve and the other one's called the mine. And it's 2 different approaches into finding your insights. So the sieve is when you start really broad. So you've got your problem from your brief or the business problem, and you go as far as you can and gather as many insights as you can, and then you distill it and you go through and you find your interesting observations, the most interesting observations, you triangulate those to find your insights. And then off the back of those insights, you can direct your strategy. The other way is kind of the opposite triangle. You start narrow at the top. So you start with some key hypotheses, insight hypotheses, or why does that problem exist? And then you go to some trusted go-to sources and you validate whether those hypotheses are true or not. For the ones that are true, or you've kind of created new hypotheses, you then just use your data sources to validate them. The former, the first one, is really good when you're tackling a problem you've never tackled before, or you're a more junior strategist, or someone within marketing that maybe needs a bit more confidence. It's really reassuring to feel like I've looked at everything. I've looked across culture, category, company, competitor. I feel like I've really interrogated the problem, and then I've got to the insights that are going to underpin my strategy. The other way is really good if you've tackled that problem before, and you go, it might be a slightly different problem, but I've tackled that before. I'm pretty sure my hypotheses are it's due to X, Y, Z. It's also very good if you're an experienced strategist, you're a bit more confident, you typically would start in that space. But they're both really good techniques for getting to really robust insights that set the stage for your strategy. Now, I would also say look really carefully at your sources. So start with your first-party customer data and first-party research. That's always the best place to start. But you can look, obviously, a lot more widely than that through your subscription services or through just general internet. But you've just got to look at the sample size, the source, how recent the data was, to make sure that what you're quoting is actually relevant, robust, and true. So yeah, that's hopefully helpful from an insight perspective. The other one is around story selling, and we purposely say story selling, not storytelling, because as a strategist or a marketeer, you ultimately need someone to buy your strategy, to get backing internally, to get budget and investment to do what you want to do. And often if you're trying to drive change and transformation, do things differently, it requires, buy-in from a number of different stakeholders. Story selling is a really great technique where you take the traditional approach to a story arc, for example, but you take it one step further, because ultimately you need to drive action. You're not just trying to educate, you're not trying to entertain, you want someone to say, yes, I'm going to buy your strategy. So the starting point that we would always say is, before you even put pen to paper or start your PowerPoint, you need to profile your stakeholder. So pick one key stakeholder that you're going to present to or sell to, because you can always adapt the story later for other stakeholders. So you profile that stakeholder and really think about what it is that the problems that they're solving or what they're trying to achieve. So what does success look like to them? What are their key metrics? What are they measured on? What do they care about? Outside of those metrics, what really drives them? What change are they trying to create within the business? And once you have that profile, that's kind of in a nutshell. I'm happy to share the full framework after the podcast. But once you've got that, you've got a really clear view of who you're telling your story to. You can then think about the narrative. So again, before you jump straight into PowerPoint, because actually it's not about the format, it's about the building blocks of the stories you're creating. I'd say get Post-it notes, get a paper or a whiteboard or a digital whiteboard, and lay out like the key headlines of your story that you want to tell. And ideally have a bit of drama in there. That doesn't hurt anyone. You can borrow a rags to riches story arc, or the evil dragons coming to slay us type thing. Gosh, we've got to do something now. So it's good to kind of have some ebbs and flows in your story, but write all the headlines out and move them around. So even though you want to tell a linear story, it might not be the most impactful story. So you've kind of got to think about how you're going to sell that in a compelling way. And then once you've got that structure, you can think about what are the 2 or 3 points of evidence I'm going to use to land each of these headlines. Because ultimately, if I don't back it up with evidence, nobody's going to believe me. So that's when you can draw on your great insights that you found in that first module. And I think at the end, it's really just thinking about your presentation style and how much or how little that you're going to share.
Wow.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, well, I think you've packed in a load of information in there. Like you just helped define what insight is and what it isn't. I think that's an important thing. We might even get you to recap on a couple of these things. And also, I really like the reframing about storytelling to story selling, because I have seen when we've put together a creative campaign idea to a marketing team in a charity, that wasn't, being totally honest, enough to get the buy-in with other stakeholders, because actually they needed it to present to their health information board or their other all well-meaning trustees or stakeholders in a charity or for-profit organisation. But if you don't support that, the selling in of the story, then, and as I've seen happen, then either it isn't embraced or it ends up being watered down and the initial impact is lost.
Yeah.
And
that's really common, right? And even, I catch myself when I'm story selling and, you sometimes forget and you fall into old habits. I would say in that scenario, it kind of flags something in my mind, which is don't wait till the point that you're onward selling to engage stakeholders. So it's really, that's the biggest learning I think I've had one of the biggest learnings since I've joined Stick and Twist. It's share early and share raw thinking. And that's very different to the traditional agencies I've been in, where you kind of come into the presentation, you go, ta-da, this is what we've been spending all these weeks doing. And it's much more around, I know this isn't polished, or I've got this kind of initial thought, or I'm kind of playing around with this problem, what do you think? And as soon as you start asking people their opinions, lots of open questions, you're building trust and rapport. Before you've even got in the room to onward sell the strategy, they're bought into it. Big meeting.
And the other point you raise is about the choices you make of what you don't include in a strategy and the things you have to discard or edit down. I always remember, I think it was Churchill that said, sorry for the long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. Yeah. Something like that he said. And that's what we always like, if we've absorbed a lot of information, but we haven't edited down, then things fall apart. And especially in the market that we are in now, where you need to cut through and you need clarity. Yes. What is there a single technique you use to choose what to delete, what to edit, or how do you go about that?
I think you have to do it along the way. I think you start with your insights and kind of making some, because there's no right or wrong answer, right? Everyone tackles problems in different ways, and there's probably like a million different variances on solutions of how you could approach any given problem. But you've got to kind of take the information that you have and make some clear decisions early based on the insights and your past experience. So you've done loads of work in the charity sector, you know what's worked, what hasn't. You can start to steer directionally early. And then I think as you're starting to tell your story, it's really thinking about who's, like back to that point, who's the stakeholder? What are they interested in hearing about? Are you actually going to help solve their problems through this solution? So, ultimately, ideally, you always have your end consumer in mind. But when you're making strategic decisions, there's often a lot more components at play from an organisational level. So I think it's just really being honest and accountable and working collaboratively. So you have people in the room saying, I don't think we need that.
Packed full of information. Yeah. Stick and Twist, you guys work with some of the UK's leading brands, like you mentioned Lloyds Banking Group, Bupa, the AA. But I know we've spoken, you've also worked with significant charities like Asthma UK and Teenage Cancer Trust. What value does an agency with that kind of cross-sector expertise, what value does that bring to the charities?
I think it's that outside thinking in. And every client of ours says, we love working with you because you work cross-sector, across multiple industries, and you can bring that outside thinking in. And I think Charities, is very specialist, and those specialist agencies, and I know you've done a lot of work in that space, they're so valuable, and there's 100% that they're needed within that sector. It's a very competitive sector. But I think for specific problems that are quite nuanced, or what's been working today isn't working anymore because of macroeconomic factors or other factors, having that outside thinking come in where you think, okay, this is how other sectors are dealing with the same problem. And we know that the parameters and the baseline is different, but you can still learn from those experiences. So we come in to tackle quite nuanced problems or specific briefs in order to drive impact. And we work hand in hand with the more specialist agencies or creative agencies in order to then activate that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today, Anna. It's incredibly insightful. I really do mean that. That's all for this episode of Between Me and You. Be sure to check out our next conversation, and I'll see you next time.